Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Daily Gwei Refuel, where I recap the latest news in the Ethereum ecosystem. I'm your host, Anthony Sassano, and today is the 14th of December, 2020. Alright everyone, let's get into it. There's a lot to cover as we're going to be covering the news of the weekend and of Friday as well. So without further ado, let's go. So just a quick reminder before we jump into all the news, the Gitcoin grants matching round is ending this week. I think the 17th of December it's ending. So if you haven't gotten your donations in, definitely go do so sooner rather than later. Don't leave it to the last minute sort of thing. And as usual, the best way to support the Daily Gwei and everything I'm doing is through Gitcoin. You can make a donation to my grant here, and it'll be matched as well, which is really cool. So yeah, if you're so inclined, I would really appreciate it. And thank you to everyone who donates. All right, on to the news from the weekend. So this isn't really news, but I wanted to quickly give a shout out to Tim Biko here, as he puts out this kind of Ethereum all core devs meeting thread every 2 weeks. So for those who don't know, every 2 weeks the core Ethereum 1.0 developers meet. And they have like an open call where people can join if they've requested to join, and everyone can watch via live stream. But if you don't want to watch the whole stream to get all the meaty bits, Tim Biko, each time this call happens, he puts together a nice thread here. So I think in general, Tim is like a great follow at this point. I mean, I've spoken about him before, how he's doing a lot of stuff with EIP 1559, but he's also working on like so many different core Ethereum protocol things. Like he does these threads with the core devs. He works at Consensus as part of the Quorum division, doing product work there. And he's also part of the ETH Cat Herders, which is basically like a few people putting out like Ethereum protocol related updates, especially on the Ethereum 1.0 side. So, I mean, highly recommend following him. These threads are always great because he'll just basically give you the meat that you need to know about what's happening with Ethereum 1.0 development, upcoming kind of hard forks, what's happening with testnets, what's happening with upgrades like 1559 and other critical upgrades. So I just wanted to give a quick shout out to Tim there, and I really appreciate all the work that he's doing. If you're listening or watching, Tim, yeah. All right, on to the next thing here. So Hayden Adams from Uniswap tweeted out, basically he was quote tweeting someone else who said, this is why CeFi works so hard to steer people to Bitcoin, is because, and this was quote tweeting another tweet that basically showed a picture of ETH moving out of CeFi and into DeFi, basically. So the amount of fees on Ethereum spent on ETH deposits to centralized exchanges has fallen from 25% in 2017 to less than 1% today. So basically, people are interacting with centralized exchanges kind of with their ETH a lot less. And that's why kind of Hayden Adams put out this tweet, and he basically goes on to say that Ethereum and ERC20 tokens is mainly used in decentralized platforms or dApps such as Uniswap, because as I've discussed before and as you've probably seen, Uniswap's volumes are challenging centralized exchange volumes at this point. And then he goes on to say, because Bitcoin doesn't have smart contracts, it's basically used by centralized platforms. And this is true, right? You can see it playing out. Like Bitcoin tends to scale and do more of the, I guess you could call it, finance stuff on centralized parties. So, there are popular platforms, especially all the centralized exchanges. There's platforms like BlockFi for doing, lending and borrowing. But on Ethereum, you have the decentralized counterparts to that, like Compound and Aave and things like that. So there's kind of this thing going on where there's two very different approaches to building out these things. Whereas because Bitcoin's limited and can't do, very expressive smart contracts, it has to scale and do this finance stuff through centralized intermediaries. Maybe in the future there will be platforms like, the Lightning Network and things like that bring this stuff to Bitcoin. But still, from my knowledge, it's extremely limited. And Bitcoin's good at what it does. It's fine for what it is. It appeals to a certain set of people, and that's all good. Whereas Ethereum is like very different. I think the way I think about the two systems is that they do share a lot of the same values, right? They value decentralization, censorship resistance, disrupting incumbents within the banking system, the finance system, governments and stuff like that. But they diverge pretty rapidly when you look at the way that each system is designed. Ethereans believe that an expressive base layer like Ethereum is preferred to something limited like Bitcoin. And Bitcoin wants to do that stuff at higher layers, and centralized platforms is one of those layers, and they kind of embrace that. Whereas Ethereans don't want that at all. They want to be able to decentralize everything basically, and that's why DeFi is so popular. So I think that kind of like contextualizes just how different the two communities are. When you get into the weeds of things, but at a higher level, they do kind of follow the same core principles, which I don't think I've seen outlaid before. Maybe I should write a piece on that for the Daily Gwei in the future. But it's something I think a lot of people miss if they're outside of crypto, and they just like looking at all these things as the same thing. Because from the outside looking in, they definitely just you don't really know, especially as a new person, what the differences are, and then you get into the weeds and you kind of see these narratives forming around each system that dictates how the core communities kind of represent the system and talk about the system. So always an interesting thing to see there. All right, a real fun tweet from DC Investor here. So this has got to do with price. So for those of you who don't really like talking about price, I apologize, but I wanted to talk about this because it was quite funny. So basically, he says, imagine having the opportunity to buy BTC at $550 in 2016 before people understood it as digital gold, but not doing it. Now imagine being able to buy ETH at $550 today before people understand it as the world's most important programmable reserve asset, but not doing it. Now, I mean, obviously, like the market caps are vastly different. BTC at $550 was a much smaller market cap than it is today, and it was smaller than Ethereum. ETH's market cap at $550 is around 60 billion, so it's already high. If ETH was to go to the same price as BTC right now, say ETH went to $20,000, for example, that would give it a market cap of, I think, 2 trillion, which, I mean, I don't think that's out of out of reality. I don't think it's something that can't happen. But obviously, like, it takes a lot more money to move these things, the higher the market cap gets. But what I really wanted to talk about outside of the price here was basically that I think at this point, Bitcoin's won this kind of digital gold narrative, and it's found kind of product market fit there with a bunch of people. It is a belief system, so whether you believe in it or not, enough people seem to believe in it to keep buying it. Price keeps going up, all that good stuff. I think, the same applies to ETH in that it doesn't have like a narrative of being digital gold, but it is a store of value still. It's being used as a store of value. People are accumulating it to hold it for longer periods of time. I mean, myself, I've held my first ETH and haven't sold any since I first bought it in early 2017. So coming up on kind of like 4 years now. And I know a lot of people like me who have held ETH, even since 2016 when it was much cheaper. Some of them bought ETH at $1 and are still holding the majority of it because they believe that there's still a lot more upside left. And they also want to, stay in the Ethereum economy and things like that. So, and then, DC Investor goes on to explain how, ETH goes beyond digital gold, right? It does a lot more than just like being like, I guess you could call it like a pet rock, as I like to call it. He describes it as the world's most important programmable reserve asset. And I mean, I believe that's what it is, right? If you look at within DeFi today and the amount of ETH being kind of used in DeFi, it's being used in staking. As I mentioned before, it's being used as a store of value. It's a reserve asset, and it's completely programmable on Ethereum. And it's the most decentralized and trustless programmable reserve asset on Ethereum. And you can, as I said, you can do many things with it. You can stake with it. You can pay fees with it. You can obviously use it as collateral. There are other tokens like, I guess, wrapped Bitcoin that you can use as collateral as well. But you can't pay fees in it. You can't stake on ETH2 with it. It's not trustless. WBTC is fully centralized, of course. So there's key differences there, and they appeal to different people. So I think, ETH's got a very strong narrative there, but it's not as simple as like digital gold, for example. The guys from Bankless like to refer to ETH as an internet bond, and this actually came out of a guy called Colin Myers from Consensus. He coined this term, and it basically means that like the network, the ETH network, is kind of issuing these ETH bonds that you can stake and then earn more kind of ETH bonds. But again, most people don't know what bonds mean and things like that. So maybe it might be better to refer to ETH as like a share of the new internet or of like a new financial system, because people know what shares are, obviously. But still, I mean, I was having this conversation with some friends earlier today, trying to simplify ETH's narrative down to what Bitcoin's is. But you can't. BTC is inherently simple, right? As I was just saying, it doesn't do expressive smart contracts. It's basically like a pet rock, whereas ETH does a lot more than that, and the Ethereum system does a lot more than that. So by design, it's more complex. You can't just like water it down to some really simple narrative for better or worse. So I think that's why, you have people outside of crypto hearing about Bitcoin first, understanding it because it's super easy to understand. But then when they get into crypto and actually decide to stay in the ecosystem, they tend to, float towards Ethereum because everything's happening on Ethereum. Then they want to understand the ETH asset because they see Ethereum. They're like, okay, there's Ethereum, the network, and then there's ETH, the asset. I'm going to buy that because it gives me exposure to things. Some people do that. Some people dive deeper and try to see, okay, why is ETH going to go up, right? Why is this a good investment? Things like that. And all that sort of stuff is a lot more complex than what BTC has in terms of a narrative, but I believe is better, right? We have EIP 1559 coming with fee burning. We have staking, uses trustless collateral, right? Just paying fees in general, uses store of value. So all those things culminate into a very valuable ETH. But it's a lot harder to explain, of course. Unless you're in the weeds, it's very hard to explain. Like I couldn't explain that to my mum, for example, who's not in the the ecosystem, in the weeds of things. Whereas if I said it's digital gold, right? Even if she doesn't believe it's digital gold, she understands exactly what that means. So yeah, I think there's a lot of work there to do for Ethereum and selling ETH as a kind of like this asset or this programmable reserve asset. I think in time we'll get better at it. There's probably some way to sell it as a simple kind of narrative that I haven't thought of yet. So I'm curious to see if anyone comes up with something that sticks. There was ETH is money, of course, which is pretty cool. But again, it didn't really permeate outside of the crypto ecosystem, and that's what you need. Whereas the digital gold thing for BTC has. So yeah, I guess that's just a little bit of a rant on that one. If you've got any things that you like, simple ways to refer to ETH and to sell its value proposition, definitely hit me up. Post it in the comments on YouTube or something, or DM me on Twitter, or post it on Twitter. I think we need more brains kind of thinking about this for sure. All right, this is a really great thread from Zubin from options platform Open. Basically, he put this thread together that describes, the options Greeks. So Greeks just being a term for different options terms like delta, theta, vega, like all these sorts of terms that you've probably heard of if you've been looking into options, but you don't know exactly what they mean. And he does a really great job of explaining them all here. I'm definitely not going to go through them all, but I did want to just highlight this thread. It'll be linked in the YouTube description. Go read it if you want to understand options better. Options are one of the most complex products that have come to DeFi so far, I think, especially because there's a lot of people like me who don't have a finance background and would never touch options normally, right? We're not traders. We're just like investing, and we're interested in the technology. Whereas you kind of want to learn this stuff, right? Because there's lots of options platforms now that are going live that can be investable, and you want to understand why. You also want to understand that this stuff's, how not to get wrecked if you're playing with options, which, a lot of newer investors do because they're very, as I said, they're very complex compared to usual things. And options are typically used by the very sophisticated players. So, if you're playing against them, you're probably going to lose if you don't understand what you're doing. So just something to keep in mind. It's a great thread to read. Go check it out. All right, I think I spoke about Connect's network on the Daily Gwei Refuel before. If not, I've definitely spoken about it on the ETH Hub podcast. But basically, they posted a tweet with a link to a video saying that they had done their first cross-chain transfer on their testnet UI. So for those who don't know what Connects is, it's basically a layer 2 kind of solution. But basically instead of just building another layer 2 scaling solution, they're building a routing protocol for layer 2s so that layer 2s can talk to each other and other chains can talk to each other, and not just like chains like Ethereum talking to one of the other blockchains, but also Ethereum talking to side chains, all across like this this standard essentially, and that's what Connect's network is trying to build. But basically they demoed it on the test nets. I think there was 2 Ethereum test nets that they used, and they're teasing that they're going to be integrating with a popular layer 2 DeFi application on mainnet soon. So I'm looking forward to that. This is huge and something that people aren't talking about. in that this is something that needs to be solved if we're going to have a layer 2 that takes off. We need communications between the different layer 2 solutions because we can't fragment liquidity and like the money Legos, or else we're going to lose a lot of what's good about Ethereum layer 1. So, I hope Connex is successful here. Kudos to them for working on something very important, I believe. And definitely go check out the rest of their work if you haven't heard of them before. They're doing a lot of good stuff. All right, a fresh what's new in ETH2 from Ben over the weekend. As I've said before, this is the best newsletter to go check out all the updates with ETH2. It's at eth2.news. And it'll redirect you to the latest edition. This edition was pretty cool because he went over basically the last 2 weeks of the Beacon chain. He went over all the slashings that happened on the Beacon chain, the test nets, updates on the tooling, staking services, the roadmap update from Vitalik, basically. And I mean, there's so much. I mean, I'm scrolling through. You can see this on the video. There's so much going on right now, and he just follows it all so well. I think I'm plugged in to Ethereum. Ben is more plugged in than I am, especially to ETH2. He covers like everything you need to know about ETH2. I don't think he misses anything. Like I've never seen him really miss anything, which is exactly why I read this newsletter. So go check this one out. It's really cool because he gives a great recap of the last 2 weeks. And if you're curious to see how it's been going, you probably haven't heard about ETH2 too much since it launched, and that's actually a good thing because there's not much happening with it. It's just running smoothly. We had a few slashings which actually were running as intended. We have more ETH being deposited. I think it's up to 1.5 million ETH now. So we have all that stuff going on, and it's just it's running smoothly. So really great to see that from the ETH2 launch, and yeah, I mean, go check out Ben's newsletter for more details there. All right, an update out of Loopring over the weekend. So Loopring's been growing really, really fast, I think, since they launched their V2 of their protocol. They went to layer 2. They're doing a lot of stuff around ZK rollups. So basically what they announced was that their TVL has crossed 30 million now. And this is a high for Ethereum layer 2 solutions, which is really cool. So you can see the growth in the chart here of the coins that people are depositing, which is really cool. It seems to be mostly USDT, LRC, and USDC, so stable coins. And I mean, that's a given, right? People love to trade in stable coins. But yeah, I just wanted to give a quick shout out to Loopring and congrats on the growth here. I think we're going to keep seeing this as time goes on. There's going to be more and more activity happening on Ethereum layer 2. And I think a lot of this is definitely due to their liquidity mining program that they're doing. But I think that's what you need. Like, for things to get adoption these days, you have to compete with things that are doing liquidity mining programs. And what better way to get people to use your layer 2 than paying them to use it, essentially. So yeah, kudos to the Loopring team for leading the charge here on, I guess, layer 2 liquidity mining. All right, really cool and interesting tweet from Rick Burden over the weekend. So he basically asked, has anyone tried adapting the interface of an Ethereum dApp based on the connected wallet's previous transactions? For example, someone with $100,000 and lots of transactions in their wallet is very different from a first-time user. You could offer a deeper onboarding experience by doing this. This is something that I hadn't thought about, but is extremely true, right? For a heavy DeFi user, you want to basically skip maybe the intros of your app and everything and explaining all the basics and things like that and just go straight to the meaty bits because they're probably going to skip it anyway. So you can offer them a better experience there. You can offer them rewards based on what they're doing within DeFi. And that's exactly what a project called Rabbit Hole is doing, which recently raised some money. And I think, I spoke about them last week. So they're doing that as well. But there's so much you can do, right? We have all this data on chain that's just not being utilized. Like, just look at someone's DeFi history. If they're like a heavy DeFi user, then you could do a bunch of different things with them. You can even market to them or advertise to them. You can give them special bonuses for being a heavy DeFi user, things like that. So again, I think that's what Rabbit Hole is trying to do to an extent here. So I'm curious to see how that project plays out. So it's something I'm going to be keeping an eye on. But yeah, good tweet from Rick, got me thinking. I think got a lot of people thinking. It was a very popular tweet. So yeah, I hope it's gotten you thinking as well. All right, so I guess the biggest news from the weekend was a lot of this kind of NFT stuff going on. So there's a lot of NFT sales happening right now. As Jacob here points out that The top 20 NFT marketplaces are doing $12.8 million in sales per month now. ETH is the MOE and UOA for all of them, so unit of account and basically money for all of them. Medium exchange is that's what MOE stands for. It just came to me. And yeah, he says $12.8 million of consumer sales of digital art each month, all priced and purchased with ETH. Probably nothing. And I think a lot of this has got to do with what's been going on with the Nifty Gateway sales. So they basically did a collab with a very famous digital artist called Beeple. So some of you may know who he is. He's got a very big Instagram account, over 1 million followers on there, and he's been doing unique art pieces or 3D design pieces every day for like 13 years. So it's been quite a while since he's been doing this stuff, and now he's actually selling that as NFTs. Selling them as unique NFTs, and he's selling them at a very cheap price, I think, compared to what their secondary values are. So I think you could buy one of them for like $1,000, and then you could resell them for hundreds of thousands of dollars. And you can actually see in the tweet here from Nifty Gateway that apparently someone bid $777,000 for this collection from Beeple, which is insane, right? This is just crazy. Like, I feel like at this point we're mixing the speculation of crypto with NFTs, and it's just going to end up like it's just going to go crazy. We already saw some of it play out over the last few months with CryptoPunks, which were the first NFT birthed in 2017, and just now that they're actually going for a lot. The rarer ones are going for hundreds of thousands of dollars. So pretty insane growth there. But yeah, just wanted to point that out because I'm pretty sure you would have seen this all over Twitter on the weekend that Beeple has been selling these things. But it's funny because he's actually bringing in a excuse me, he's actually bringing in a whole new cohort of people into Ethereum that getting their first experience of Ethereum through this NFT stuff. So completely new users will be coming in because of this, because he's got such a big reach. And I've said for quite a while now that I think a lot of new users are going to come through the NFT space, the crypto gaming space, because they're just fundamentally different users to people in like DeFi and people who are in crypto and want to be in crypto for like the speculative side of it. So yeah, I'm curious to see the growth numbers. I haven't looked at them myself yet, but definitely I think it's been exploded. Outside of volume, also unique users and things like that. I mean, I just assume that that's kind of exploded upwards over the last couple months for sure. All right, I wouldn't call it drama, but an interesting proposal that was on Compound Finance. You can see here. So what this proposal proposes is that comp should be distributed to the affected users in the recent DAI liquidations. So I spoke about this when it happened. There was some DAI liquidations on Compound due to the Oracle showing a much higher price than DAI was at, due to Coinbase basically showing a much higher price than $1 for DAI. Now, this is actually losing this proposal, so there's more people voting against it than for it. You can see the voters here, right? The big voters like Polychain Capital, Black, Dharma. I mean, if I view all here, Argent, Kyber Network. So these are they're not nobodies, right? Like Pantera Capital. These are somebodies, and they're voting against it. 76% against. And then if you go to the for votes, I don't know whose address this is. It's not labeled. But basically they've got that there. You got Instadap, the DeFi Pulse Index voting through the Index Corp, DeFi Rate, Kane from Synthetics, Monet Supply. I mean, they're not no names either, right? So it's kind of like this split between these funds. It seems like the funds have voted against it, like Polychain Capital. I don't know if this is a fund, Black. You have Pantera Capital, which is a fund. Consensus, which I'm assuming is part of their fund. Paul is also part of, I think he's part of Pantera. Yeah, from memory. So that's fund. Whereas if you look at the fours, there's not really any funds here, right? I mean, most of them are unlabeled addresses, but it's like ecosystem projects. But the against ecosystem projects as well, like Dharma and Argent and Kyber. So it's just cool to see, like, I guess the distribution here. Personally, I mean, this might be maybe unpopular, but I would vote against this proposal only because, I mean, I kind of agree with Pantera. They actually put out their kind of explanation here as to why they're voting against it. But basically, the TLDR is that there are risks when you use this stuff, and we shouldn't be compensating users every time these risks play out, basically. So I won't read through the whole thread, but that was like the gist of it. And then they kind of think that the solutions of a more sustainable way and a more healthy way of to kind of like reimburse people is to have like a protocol insurance fund, make sure that the exploit doesn't happen by having multi-oracle designs, and removal of kind of language in the compound UI, such as safe max, right? So, because that gives people a false sense of security. And I agree with them. I think there are so many other things we can do rather than socializing the losses. Because this effectively puts the losses on comp token holders, because it means the comp price, in theory, should go down because people are expecting, more comp to flood the market from people wanting to sell to recoup their losses. And I've never been a fan of that. I've never been a fan of socializing losses like this. Whereas a protocol fund that basically accrues value over time due to due to like fees being paid within the compound protocol and things like that, I think, and liquidations and stuff, I think that's better. And on top of that, Compound didn't have a social contract to basically distribute comp to affected users, right? And neither did Maker, but you might be thinking, oh, well, Maker printed more MKR tokens. It's like, yes, because that's part of the kind of design of the system, and part of the social contract is that if the Maker system becomes under-collateralized, more MKR will be printed to recollateralize it, and that's exactly what happened. So, yeah, anyway, it looks like this vote's active for another 5.5 hours from when I'm recording this video. I think by the time this video goes out, it might be almost over. But basically, it seems like the against is going to win, so the people won't get compensated. I do wonder how the comp price is doing here. I haven't looked at it. I assume it's probably flat as it waits for the outcome of this. And if the outcome is against, maybe the comp price will go up, right? Be interesting to see what happens there. I'll be keeping an eye on it. But yeah, interesting to see this from Compound and to see people voting against, which I think is actually the right vote here for the reasons I outlined. And I'm glad that Pantera put out this thread here to explain their reasoning as well, not just voting against for the sake of it. All right, last tweet from Justin Drake. He posted this yesterday, I think. So he makes note of that 10.7% of validated deposits in ETH2 are from Kraken, the centralized exchange right now. And then he notes that Coinbase and Bitfinex have 5.8 times more ETH than Kraken, which means that 2 exchanges could control 1/3 of all the validators, 5 exchanges could control half of the validators. You should stake from home to avoid exchange fees and decentralize the network out. Look, there's no sugarcoating it. Centralization, stake centralization on exchanges has always been a worry. It's always been part of the design mechanism of Ethereum proof of stake. It is less of a worry, I think, for Ethereum proof of stake than it is for something like delegated proof of stake, which is a model that a lot of the other networks kind of use. So you can see here a comment from Shillbilly that says, this ain't going to end up similar to EOS, is it? With exchanges taking over the EOS block producer slots using people's EOS to vote. And then Trent Van Epps goes on to say, well, EOS is delegated proof of stake or DPoS, which is very different from Ethereum's pure proof of stake. Yes, there will be large entities like exchanges staking, but they don't hold a special position distinct from single 32 ETH validators, which is true, right? So as I said, this has been designed, the ETH2 staking system has been designed with this in mind, and the researchers and developers are fully aware of this, but you should encourage people to stake on their own, but at the end of the day, most people are going to be defaulting to what's easiest, unfortunately, which will be exchange staking. Now, I mean, ETH2 has also been designed to resist like a majority kind of having the stake and being able to take over the network. So even if 2 exchanges got together to kind of, take over the network, the rest of kind of, I guess, the ecosystem can come together, and the system can basically come together. And if those exchanges decide to attack the system, that ETH will be burned. And then that's customer deposits that are burned as well, right? So when you think about it, the incentives are pretty good here, because the exchanges aren't going to risk their user funds to attack the network, right? So I'm kind of like not really worried about exchanges having stake centralization. I'm more kind of worried about the kind of, I guess, like attackers that don't care about money and will just blow as much money as they want to attack the thing. And that's nation states, right? So if you look at it from that lens, you need to make it as expensive as possible for nation states to get 1/3 of the validators, or to control one half of the validators or whatever. So if they want to control one half of the validators right now, they would need to acquire 750,000 kind of ETH. I think actually more than that, because they'd be adding to the existing pool. So they would actually need to acquire another 1.5 million ETH on top of the 1.5 that's in there to acquire 50% of the network. I think that's right. It sounds right to me. That's a lot of ETH. I think that's like $800 million worth of ETH. So obviously that's like a rounding error for nation states in the military budget. I mean, the US alone has an $800 billion military budget. But if you were to try and acquire $800 million worth of ETH, like pure buy pressure, right? You're not selling any, you're just buying $800 million worth of ETH. You're going to push the price up. So then the price of that ETH is gonna keep increasing. You're gonna keep having to buy more of that ETH at a higher price. So your total purchase price for 1.5 million ETH can end up being a lot more than $800 million. It can be very well into the billions of dollars. And on top of that, as the ETH price goes up, right, the ETH percentage of staking rewards stays the same. For example, on the Beacon chain, and will obviously go down as more ETH is staked. But you're going to have other people wanting to come in and stake because the rewards in dollar terms are now higher, so the ROI is greater. So you have that playing out, right? And you have the the nation state trying to enter into staking, which takes a long time because only 900 validators are allowed to enter at once. So 900 validators divided by 32 is about 300 kind of ETH. Sorry, not 300 ETH, 3,000 ETH or something. Probably more than that, 30,000 ETH, I think. Okay. Sorry, my math is wrong there. But, that's like a small fraction of the total amount of ETH that they're buying and trying to stake. And that's on top of everyone else trying to get in as well. So you have this culmination of basically all these compounding factors of they're not going to be able to acquire 1.5 million ETH for $800 million. They're not going to be able to get into ETH2 staking with all of that ETH for quite a while. They're going to push the price up by buying that much ETH, which is going to encourage more people to kind of buy ETH as well and to stake it because the ROI goes higher. And on top of that, if it's detected by the whole ecosystem that an attack is coming from a nation state or attack is coming from a big entity, which if it's someone buying 1.5 million ETH to attack the network, you can probably be sure that it's a nation state. Like, it's a high likelihood, right? Then what ends up happening is that all that ETH, say all that ETH gets staking, right? And then the ecosystem says, okay, we're just going to fork off. We're going to burn that ETH and we're going to fork off because they're trying to attack the network. And then that ETH is just removed from circulation, and then the nation state has to do it all again, right? Unlike with kind of like, I guess, proof of work mining, where you can't burn people's ASIC miners or their hardware. Basically, they can keep attacking and keep attacking. And Vitalik actually spoke about this in what's called his, he calls it a spawn camp attack. So like, you keep trying to kind of recover from this attack, but because you can't burn miners' hardware, they just keep attacking. Whereas with proof of stake, you can burn the stake and then they can't attack anymore. If you Google it, I think Vitalik Buterin spawn camp attack, proof of stake, something like that with those keywords in it, you'll be able to find it. It's a pretty cool little post. I think it was one of his most recent posts on his blog, so you can find it there as well. But yeah, I guess I ranted on for a little bit there, but I guess that goes into the wider discussion about why I believe proof of stake is better than proof of work, and Vitalik goes into it in his blog post too. There are certain trade-offs here that I won't go into. Vitalik definitely goes into it in his blog post, so go check it out. You know what? I'm just gonna link it for all of you in the YouTube description because I think it's worth you reading it. So definitely go check that one out. I think this episode's gone on long enough for now. So yeah, thank you everyone for listening. That's all for today. Definitely give the video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. Subscribe to the Daily Gwei newsletter. And go join the Discord as well. And I'll see you all tomorrow for another update. Thanks, everyone.